Okay.
So, hello everybody and welcome to our live talk today. And I'm very happy to have some of my African colleagues, Denis, Francis, Zachuas, and Wycliffe, and I'm very, very happy to have you here. May you introduce yourself a bit at the beginning and then we start in the middle of the talk. And whoever has the children playing in the background, please mute your mic as long as you're not talking. Okay, who wants to start?
I think I'll go first because I'm the oldest. On the show, I've been here many times. I'm happy to be back as always. I'm Zachuas Ogonji Olopi. By now, you know me. I'm an education enthusiast and I'm very keen on development, especially for Africa and African people. And myself, I'm a founder of Inua Village to Global Foundation, an organization that deals with access to quality education for many vulnerable families and children. And I also work a lot with children, women, communities, just ensuring that people live a better life. They can achieve their dreams in whatever circumstances they are in. So that's who I am, and I'm very glad to that you have us today, Marianne, and I look forward to a wonderful conversation with the rest of the panelists.
Me too. Who wants to go next?
I can go next.
All right.
All right. Sorry, Wycliffe. My name is Denis Kedenji. I'm a medical researcher. I do healthcare research and consultancy in technical writing. But I'm also an enthusiast of education, given that my career is education-based. And my background, having struggled with poverty, to get out of it through education, has shaped me into becoming a sort of an educationist. So I'm here for the right reasons.
You're done? Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Wycliffe Ogaga. Professionally, I'm a lecturer at the university in Kenya, Rongo University. So I'm an educationist through and through. Over and above that, I'm involved in a number of charity events, supporting orphans, affording education opportunities to some of those vulnerable children within our communities. I'm glad to be here and I hope we'll have a wonderful discourse. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, a very good afternoon to all of you. My name is Francis Alexandria Ochieng. I work with the Inua Village to Global Foundation, and I work in the Department of Marketing. And I'm also a student of Google Academy. So I'm very happy and glad to be here. I have so much passion on the preservation of African inheritance and its culture. Thank you.
Thank you. Zachuas, we can't hear you because you're muted.
It's fine. I was just happy to hear all of them introduce themselves. That's all.
Okay, so Zachuas, as you're leading a school and have a lot of children around you, would you like to tell us a bit about your organization?
Yes, thank you. Inua Village to Global Foundation started in 2017. Prior to that, I had been working with children in other organizations. I had been supporting women and community members in various capacities, starting as a community-based organization. And in 2017, we settled to start to build our own organization that will transform and bring access to quality education to all children, especially in areas where such facilities, education facilities don't exist, where there is a challenge that communities are not participating in access to education for their children. So our vision and our mission is very simple. We build small model community schools that bring together parents, learners, and everyone that is supposed to be involved in education to have conversations, to create spaces and to create avenues for children to learn the best way they can. We are emphasizing a lot on using locally available opportunities, resources, to ensure that the children learn the best way. So beside that, we also deal with things that also affect access to quality education. We know hunger is a big problem. It's a big challenge for children. That's why we have a very elaborate feeding program in our schools, and we are actually doing farming, empowering families to produce food for themselves, to be able to feed themselves and to feed the children. We are also focusing on empowering parents to be able to pay, because we say all the time, quality education is not cheap. It is very, very expensive. And we even see that here locally, that anybody who wants a good education and they desire to study abroad, they pay an arm and a leg. So even us will not be different. If we went into the community and set up a very good school, very good infrastructure, but then we did not empower parents to be able to pay for their children in such a facility, we will end up serving the rich and the well-up of that particular society and leaving out the poor that we intended to serve. So deliberately, we create opportunities for parents to be employed, community members to be employed through our community industry to earn, and when they earn, they're able to invest in their children's education. And lastly, when they are earning something, they have money to save, they have money to be able to put together, to put aside, to invest. And that's why we created the last pillar, which is our saving and cooperative society, a saving and credit cooperative society, which is now fully constituted, where they're able to bring their little resources together and they can lend to one another. They can be able to support each other through affordable credit, which then goes into investing, buying a car, building a house, or doing something that can be able to enhance their well-being. So that's our approach. So we are comprehensively dealing with poverty, access to quality education, and ensuring that we do this in a way that is sustainable, in a way that also brings people together to work closely with each other, in essence, driving the charity aspect of it. So we really appreciate to be here, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about my work.
Yes, this is very different to what we experience here in Europe, because usually here in Europe, education is free. And I think that not everybody knows that in other countries you need to pay for it, because the infrastructure for giving the education free is not there.
Yes, actually, when you hear from the policy perspective, government says education is free, and Kenya has a free primary education policy, and they are now even introducing secondary education free. But there are other parameters that come into play that make that free to be a big challenge. For example, when they declared this policy of free primary education back in 2002, there was so many admissions that happened in the government schools, and they were few. So you find the ratio of teacher to children went up. There were limited classrooms. Some children were learning under the trees, and that's still happening in some areas to date. So even though the number of enrollment went up, the quality of education available to the children went down, because the ratio of teacher to learner went up. The facilities that are available to the learners became a big challenge. So the struggle becomes those who have money can pay for extra tuition, can be able to pay in private schools, and you find, because all these are doing similar exams, it seems to advantage those who have extra resources over those who don't have resources at all, and they just have to depend on the government schools. So that's still a challenge that we are seeing, and that's why there is still a need to continue to complement government effort in regard to making education available to all.
So it's more about the quality of the education. How big are schoolrooms usually, or how many children are usually in the classrooms of a government school?
It will really depend from area to area, but from the latest numbers we have in government, some schools are doing one classroom, 80 learners. We have in areas where one classroom will have up to 100, and some will have to study in sessions of smaller groups. And this makes the teachers really, really strained. So in areas where we have better access, they are doing 1 to 40, 1 to 60. And in some areas, we are doing 1 to 100, one classroom, 100 learners, one teacher. And this you find it's actually bringing in the inequality that we are talking about, because at the end of the period, 8-year period or 6-year period, all of them are subjected to similar evaluation across the country that then determines how they transition. So this does not bring equality in terms of how they start, all of them. Yeah.
Okay. So it really is a big difference whether you go to a school with better education level or to just some government school.
Yes, yes, it is very important, and I'll give fellow panelists to add on to that, but it's very important how the kids start, because starting is key. If they don't get proper start, examination is done in English here. A lot of the subjects are examined in English. So you find in some areas, the numbers are showing a class 6 pupil or a class 7 pupil is not able to read a full sentence in English. And they are just 2 years away to doing their final exam that determines which secondary school they go to. So that such numbers really give us a lot of concern.
So you are all very, very well educated. How did you make it?
I'll pause that so I can give the others opportunity to speak, and then I'll add mine.
Maybe I should start. I'll start because I went through 2 phases of education through charity. One unstructured, the other structured. The unstructured aspect was the most difficult part of my life, where I transitioned from the free primary education where we were being provided with the books, pens. I think we only bought uniforms. So it was really free that time, although these days it's not that free. Then going to high school, it wasn't free. So I was transitioning from studying for free to paying fees. And I didn't have anyone that I would say was a reliable source of my fees. So I struggled dropping in and out of school. Actually joining, my mother had to do a fundraising that didn't even pay a fifth of the fees. So that's unstructured charity, where people come together and organize, we call it here Arambe, and what is contributed is determined by your economic status. Because I remember at the same time, my uncle, who is well off, had another Arambe, and they got about 2 million Kenya shillings, but I got about 11,000 shillings, which minus the costs, only 5,000 was available to pay the fees. So that's the unstructured part. So I struggled with that for about 2 years, that is Form 1 and 2. Then while I had almost dropped out of school because I had stayed at home for about 1 month, I encountered a group called Zoo Ministries, that is Zoo Giving Hope. Mm-hmm. They were actually recruiting people not to fund education, but to fund economic activities that would get them out of poverty. Mm-hmm. So I put my case that the only way I would get out of poverty is through education. And through Gon's intervention, they took me exceptionally and funded my education for the other remaining 2 years. So by staying in school for those 2 years through the structured charity, I was able to complete and get an A that earned me a place at the University of Nairobi, where I did my bachelor's degree in medical laboratory sciences. Then from there, I started working as a self-employed research assistant. And I raised funds myself now to self-sponsor in master's in medical microbiology that increased my research prowess. And then now I actually just recently graduated from the master's program, and I'm planning to enroll for a PhD. So I believe that would have not happened if the structured charity didn't come in place, because the unstructured one and failed. People had given up on me. Those who were giving a little so that I would not be sent from school had actually kind of given up on me because the burden was becoming huge. But with the structured charity, there wasn't any struggle for the 2 years. So thank you for giving up, I hope. And for people like Zach and Marianne, who are facilitating structured charity, big up and keep up that spirit. Thank you.
Thank you, Denis. That is very interesting to hear. So it was quite on the edge that you could make your career.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope I can go through. I would like to pick up from exactly how, from how Zachuas has described the situation of the status and the situation around schools. The biggest challenge, because then I have seen not only in Kenya, but I've even seen in my own home country, Uganda, these problems, we seem to have the same problem. I don't know whether we are born of the same father in Africa and the same mother, so we go through the same problems. But even in Uganda, from my own experience, I had an opportunity to go to an Indian school. That time, the Indians were so much in charge of Uganda. And I was among the few African children that attended that school. But even then, when I went to that school in a structured way, there is something that I noticed. The number of pupils, the ratio of pupils to teacher is usually big. Even in that school, we were like around 80 children in one class. And when I transitioned to high school, it even worsened. The school I went to had a population of around 4,800 students. And in my Form 1, when I transitioned, I remember that class, we were 123 for one teacher. And that even made the situation more difficult. And in terms of learning and quality delivery for the teachers, I believe, or I personally feel it was very difficult for one teacher to focus on 123 students and to ensure that they pass. But one thing that I've learned from all this is not the quality of the teaching. It's not the quality of the teaching that we need. It is usually the facilities and the resources that are put in the education sector to be able to boost education and see that the delivery of quality education is key and is taken up. 123 of us that went to Form 1, and I think those who managed to make it to university that I do know and do remember are actually less than 20. Those who transitioned. So in the middle there is challenges, some of them which are family-based, some are system-based, and then some are just because of the situations surrounding you and it forces you to fall out. So when Zachuas talks about the big number of children going to the ratio of teachers, it is something which is of a great concern. And this is this is because we don't have the structures. We don't have the systems that even the systems that exist cannot be able to sustain the available number of learners that need to go to school and want to go to school, and even those that are already going to school. So you see that already creates a challenge in terms of delivery of quality education to the community.
So I see. you need, would need more resources and more teachers? Or are there enough teachers?
The teachers are not enough. That is what I can say. But also the facilities in terms, let's take an example, physical facility. You will find a school with 500 children having only 8 classrooms. Sometimes at most is 10. And you see the 10 have to be divided. If the 500 has to be divided amongst the 10, and then they usually squeeze, the space is not enough. So when you look at it in that way, the resources to add more physical facilities is also a challenge. Mm-hmm. But even then, the teachers, the number of teachers the teachers who are there to be able to render that service sometimes is also a problem because it's not enough.
Okay, I see. Wycliffe, as you are working in the university, how do you look at those topics? Oh, we sadly cannot hear you because your mic is muted.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you very much, Marianne. Let me come in with my thoughts. And I want to address myself to the topic of discussion we are having today: education, poverty, and charity. And I think the reason why we are bringing in charity and poverty is for us to afford better education systems for all. Now, let me start by applauding the government of Kenya for a number of interventions that's put in place to increase the opportunities for education for pupils and every other person who wants to learn. Let me start by mentioning that we have about 10.2 million pupils enrolled in public and private primary schools in Kenya. And we have about 32,000 primary schools in Kenya, mostly both private and public. While in secondary schools, we have about 3.5 million people enrolled in both public and private secondary schools. And we have about 10,400 such secondary schools in the country. In the universities, we have about 570,000 students enrolled in those schools. And there are about 74 public-private universities in the country. If you look at those numbers, it goes on to tell you just how many learners we have against a thinner population, so to say, of learning institutions. And I want to also mention that Kenya, in terms of literacy, I think we have a literacy percentage of 82, which is really laudable, honestly. And with that, the literacy rate among males is 84%, while the literacy rate among females is 78%, which is still a very good record. But this goes on to tell you that we have not achieved these levels of literacy overnight. There are a number of opportunities the government of Kenya has put in place to increase and improve education opportunities and just better that. Some of these include the free primary education that was established back, I think, in 2003. And then there is also the element of free day secondary school that was introduced in 2008 by the government of Kenya. In so to say, today, if you went to a public primary school, it will basically be free. So that what will remain for a parent or a guardian to do is to probably purchase uniforms and study materials for their pupils. But then the element of tuition fee and such kind of things were waived by the government, so it is free. The same happens in secondary schools in Kenya, especially if you go to day secondary schools. So the tuition component of secondary school is free. And I know most of the boarding secondary schools in Kenya do charge an amount of money that they would call probably boarding fee, so that it takes care of accommodation and meals for the various pupils. But again, one of the things I think I'll speak to is whether it is free as it should be free. In the university as well, we have two categories of learners in the university. Those who are coming in for parallel programs who are self-sponsored, they pay full fee. And then we have also government-sponsored students. who are being supported majorly by the government, and they actually pay probably a quarter of the fee that a parallel student will take. So you will find that that's also an intervention that has been put up by the government of Kenya to support access to education opportunities for people. Now, I'm mentioning this so that we go ahead to understand what are some of the challenges that we have had and what are some of the keywords that we have had over time to correct those challenges. Today, we have about 85,000 students graduating from universities in Kenya, and around another 50,000 or thereabouts graduating from higher institutes of learning, including polytechnics, vocational training institutions, those who are doing trade, handicraft courses and things like that. So we are seeing much and much, almost in total, about 100 or so students, 100,000 students who are finishing the higher levels of study. And these people are being churned out into the job market. And we have also seen today, the government is insisting on 100% transition from whatever level of education to the next. That is, the government expects every student who sits for KCPE, finishing class 8 with the current curriculum, the 844, all those people who sit class 8 must transition to high school. So it will tell you that with the introduction of the free primary education, there was an influx of learners into the various institutions of learning in primary. But then we have not matched the infrastructural support to meet the number of learners that came in as a result of the free primary education. And now we have begun churning out these people who came into their large numbers into high schools. And we have also not really put up enough sufficient infrastructure to also support the number of learners who are coming into high school. And those learners will also transition to university. So it's telling you already that we have got a very big stress in terms of the number of infrastructure to support the growing number of learners that we have in the education system. And I'll also address myself to some of the possible interventions and also bring in the element of issues charity, how to come into play. But now going forward, Marianne, I also want to say that out of these about 100 students who come from the learning institutions, the higher learning institutions, universities, technical training colleges, and all that, they are being churned into the job market. And then the question also comes, do we have sufficient job opportunities to absorb those numbers? Do we have the technical capacity of these people not to seek options of self-employment, to seek options of their own creativity, to see how they could also earn a living over and above white-collar jobs? And those are some of the questions that we need to answer, especially with education. So I was addressing myself to what the government is doing. Number one, the introduction of free primary education. Number two, we have provision of learning materials. The government is providing books, learning textbooks to especially public primary and secondary schools, so that every learner can have access to essential core textbooks for studies. Again, the government has brought up the element of issues with bursary. Bursary are funding support that we give to pupils, mostly to students who are in secondary school and also in universities or other technical learning institutions. So these bursaries are being given through the Constituency Development Fund, which is a national government program. We also have county governments, because today we have devolved units in Kenya who are issuing bursaries at the county level and also at the ward levels, so that students can always access and fill in for bursaries for the educational support. Over and above that, we have also had a number of improvements in infrastructure, building new schools in a number of primary schools, a number of secondary schools, so that we try to increase those numbers of learning facilities. And also, the government has also enhanced aid through favorable policy framework to allow people like Zach, people like myself, who are involved in a number of support programs for probably children. We have a number of aid organizations in the country that are offering support to students and pupils across the country. And we have a favorable policy structure that is allowing organizations to operate within the country and offer such support. And I think that is something that we can also laud our government for doing. And then we also have government-based funding. I've talked about the Higher Education Loans Board, funding to students who want to pursue education, especially at university. And also those who are going for technical training institutions are more or less being funded by the government of Kenya so that they can continue and pursue whatever programs that they want to do there. With all those successes, we still have our challenges in education, which I think I also want to address myself to. And the speakers before me, Denis, Zach, and Francis, have alluded to the low numbers of teacher to student ratios. Actually, in primary schools, we have about a 56-to-1. That is pupil to teacher ratio, 56 students for one teacher. And that is way, way above what is recommended of about 40-to-1, or in other places 30-to-1. So already you're seeing that we are putting up a lot of stress on the teaching faculty with regard to how many students that they can handle at every given time. And that also goes to really bring into question the quality of education we get when those numbers are bulging in the upwards. At the same time, if you go to high schools, we have 41-to-1 against about 30-to-1. So already, and also at university, we have actually more than 10-to-1 against 1-to-2. So you're looking at a very lopsided figure in terms of our teacher pupil or teacher student ratios across all the levels of education in the country, primary, secondary, and universities. So already we are having so many learners with very few faculty. And I think that also goes to probably just try to bring into question the quality of education we get, because as those numbers enlarge and we do not service it with the sufficient number of teachers, then again, we bring in a lot of stress into the teaching fraternity. Over and above that, we still lack infrastructure. I had Zach mentioned that we have classes sometimes going up to 80. Trust me, some of them go up to 100 in one class for every other learners. And we have also had even cases where students still learn under trees. And I think we have had that documented in the country. So we still have a very low infrastructure setup to support the education system, especially with regard to the high numbers. And these high numbers, I must repeat, are coming in with the introduction of free primary education that really enforced the law that every child of school-going age in Kenya must go to school as a mandatory requirement. And with that, we have not really built sufficient infrastructure to support the huge influx of students into our learning institutions. And I think the very first lots have already found themselves in the university as a result of the free primary education. So those are some of the challenges we are. Let me address myself to charity in a few, and the essence of the same with regard to education. And I want to also tie a lot of that into some of the things that we are doing also at personal level. And I'm very proud of my brother Zach through the the Global Foundation that they're doing there. We have realized that a number of us, including myself, if it were not as a result of charity, the goodwill of good people, men and women of this country, of this world, who would come in to support some of us during our times of need, we wouldn't have gotten the education we've gotten. I work today in the university as a lecturer and also as an administrator in the education system. And I know firsthand how much essential it is for just somebody to get that support. A number of times, we say that in our country, you can transition from primary to secondary school. If your education stops there, you're as good as not learned in terms of the opportunities that are available for you. Most of the time, our youths have a disposition that if we finish up university or we get another course from a higher institution of learning, then we could get a job and we have better lives. So our education system has been so much feeding into how much can we do to complete our education, then we go into white collar job employment, and then at least you can earn living. I hope that with the introduction of the CBC curriculum, we are going to have a mentality shift so that our paradigm of white collar jobs is so much replaced by what we can do on our own to create self-employment, to be more creative and innovative, so that at least we can get things done without looking at the white collar jobs. But as it is today, Marianne, and I must confess, a number of us feel that unless until you have the educational acumen to be able to access white-collar jobs, you are a failure, or so to say. So a lot of our stress is on transitioning from secondary school into a higher level of education, say university, so that from there you begin going into, you know, the white-collar job kind of employment, and then at least you earn your living and you continue. Now, that so said, you will find that a number of people who have finished secondary school, who have not managed to go to higher institutions of learning, are considering themselves as rather failures if they don't get any opportunities. They will be in the village and then also just join in doing the manual jobs, some of those things that the villagers do there. They don't have any further opportunities. In Kenya, we have got a very clear cutoff point to join universities. That is C+. So probably if you don't get that C+ and then get to the university, then, you know, your chances begin to dwindle. Unless probably you get somebody, especially also if you don't get the government support program, you must also get somebody who is going to pay your fee probably through parallel, so that at least you can finish up that level of education. Charity is not just helping people at the highest level. Charity is helping people even at the lowest level, right from primary. We have pupils in primary schools who still cannot afford to go to school as much as it is free. These people can't go to school, number one, because they are hungry every so often. They cannot afford to go to school. They're dealing with vicious hunger due to poverty. And number two, they cannot even afford uniform. They cannot afford shoes. They cannot afford the stationery that is needed. And these are responsibilities of parents or guardians. So as long as they cannot afford this, you will find that a number of these pupils do not go to school, as much as education is free. And also, if that level cannot go to school at primary level, it means that education also in high school is also affected. And this brings me to the question I was asking myself much earlier. Is it really free, as we say? Today, if you go to a public secondary school in Kenya, you will realize that mostly people pay between 10,000 Kenya shillings to about 20,000 Kenya shillings, depending on the place. And yet we are saying education in secondary school, especially day secondary school, is free. But we still find most of the schools charging a mandatory fee of 10,000 to 20,000, and they want to christen it as meals. Okay, that's what they want to call it. And they say that it is optional. So it's either a child can carry packed lunch, or a child can pay between 10 to 20,000 Kenya shillings as fees. But trust me, whether you carry your packed lunch, you're going to pay this money. So at the end of the day, it is not as free as we want to say. And I think these are some of the things we need to call on to our government to really monitor and check, so that we make sure that if we say education in secondary schools is free, it is definitely free. But it is not free when students or people or parents and guardians are still forced to pay those monies across the system. So we are looking at that and seeing a situation where we still have people who cannot afford. Now, if we didn't have charity, if we didn't have support system for some of these people, you'll realize that we have a number of pupils who will still miss on the free education, so to say. And I just want to I want to really applaud a number of aid organizations that we have had in the country, those that helped me as well. And probably I think a number of us have spoken to how they went through their studies. And I think I can also bring that into light a little bit and tie it to some of the things that we are doing also at personal and individual level with some of the groupings, the aid organizations that we have in the country. Marianne, I'm proud to mention that I was supported through a program, and one of the beautiful ladies is a German who supported me through my university studies, Madam Hedran Seiring. Thank to her so much, ma'am, for the opportunity she gave me. After that, after I went to school and things happened, I am now here. I'm a university don. I'm a senior administrator. But then we started also an organization to also support young ones. Our situation is that we are trying to mentor people from a very young age, where we are taking in student pupils from class 1 up to around class 6. Try to see how we can mentor them into the kind of people we want them to be. So over and above just affording education opportunities, we are providing meals, we are providing school fees, and everything that is needed. So we have taken these people as our own children, just like I will live with my own children, so that at least we afford them the basics that we never had as we were growing up, and then also that they can have better opportunities to afford education. So currently, in Rongo, where I live, and in Aurora, my home area, we have a total of about 34 such cases that we are supporting through education system. A number of them are still in primary schools. We are having a few who are now completing primary school and are transitioning to high school. And I think it's a system that works. We have an organization in Kenya called Patoipa. Patoipa is an umbrella organization that is helping us to support some of these children. So we have the programs in Mombasa, Ukunda, we have the programs in Siaya, Ugunja, we have the programs in Nairobi, we have the programs in Rongo, and also now we have the programs also in Aurora, where I come from. And we are offering what we call a total care kind of support system, so that we take care of these children through the education journey, right from the first levels of primary all the way to university. And I think there are so many organizations that do that across the country. That I really want to support. Let me leave it there for my colleagues, but it's just important that at least we realize some of the milestones that the government has made, but also appreciating the challenges that we still have live with, and also just bringing into perspective how much aid and charity can also help to improve education opportunities for people who can't afford it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, I think Ogaga has spoken on so many things that we all relate to. And if it was not for charity, as you can hear, many of us will not be here, because I did my primary school in 2003. I passed, I got calling letters to secondary school, and there was no money. I remember the day when the letters came, they were just collected and put there. There was nothing that my mother could do at that time. So a head teacher, a head mistress of my primary school actually sent for me to be called a few months after everybody had transitioned. And she told me, you have a huge potential and I could help you join secondary school, but I want you to come back and retake the exam. So repeat and do that class again. So I went back, I sat in that primary school, did my exam the second time. I passed very well. I didn't get a calling letter at the second time. I think they forgot about me, but she kept her promise. She's the one who called me after a few months and there was no opportunity yet. She had talked to a neighbor of hers who ran a private school in Nairobi, and had talked to that person. He's called Nehemiah Ndeta. I want to give him a lot of thanks. Nehemiah Ndeta accepted to have me in his school in Nairobi. And I was carried from the village like a package up to Nairobi, and I was put in a school. And my work was to wake up and learn. And a lot of things that have happened since then when I joined Form 1, where I didn't pay even a single shilling. I was assisted through the 4 years by a sponsor called Julian from Germany. They paid my school fees. I went through, I scored the grade I got. I was able to transition. I did a diploma course, which I was assisted also by Heidrun Seirin. From there, I transitioned. I went to university where I did a degree course in development studies. That was paid for by church as a loan, a church loan. And that's where I am today. So I am a product of charity since the day I finished my class 8. And I couldn't have been where I am today if people didn't deliberately come in to support and to see the potential I have. And because of that, I'm passing that down to others. I'm doing the same to others. And I have created opportunity through the primary school system. We have for 800 plus children to go through school. I have been able to, we have supported, I think since when I was in high school, I've been looking for sponsorships for many others who cannot be able to afford. I think I've lost count of the number of people I've assisted get scholarship or sponsorships to go through high school and to go through college. Because then I just do it as a way of life, because I know if I give a chance to that person, they have a chance to be able to make something out of their life. So when we talk about the topic of today, it's personal to me, it's close to my heart, but I also want to laud some of the things that Ogaga has said, that our government has really tried, has created an environment through which we can compete, we can be able to create opportunities for many to be able to access education. I want to touch on something about right now, even where we are in Kenya, we are not talking about access. We are talking about quality of what is being accessed. Access is there, at least from what Ogaga has presented and from what I know. There is a school within vicinity of any child. We can't say there are no schools. Even if it is under a tree, there is a school. Now, what we are calling and what our call is and what we are investing in is, what is the quality of the education that is being accessed? Because if that education is not quality, then this person will not be able to depend on themselves later on, and they become a burden to the economy. So if you just take them through the process for the sake of it, that they go through primary, they transition to high school, they transition to university or colleges, or they don't transition, at the end, you are just creating a burden at the end of the process, because then you have so many people who cannot translate their skills, their ability to think into solving real life problems. And that's why we are really concerned about quality and the importance that the organizations similar to what I'm running and what Ogaga is running and many other charitable organizations and private schools do is they offer a sort of a field where people are competing, because everywhere where we just have public schools, the level of education there, the quality of education there is relatively lower. If it's just a private school alone, a public school alone, you will find that there is laxity in the teachers, there is laxity in how things are implemented. But immediately there is a private institution, there is another charity organization that is also providing schools, and I want to laud the faith-based institutions. I think schools that are run by churches, that are run by mosques, are also very, very significant. There are many across the country. Anywhere we have such an institution, the level of the quality of education is up, the level of learning is up, because then government is competing. The government institutions has someone they are competing with, because every parent wants the best for their child. Immediately someone is able to pay and they can be able to afford, they will choose the best place for their child. They choose that their child goes to the best institution. So with that ability that there is an option, there is an alternative. It's not just that government alone. We are seeing that also putting pressure to government institutions to do better, to perform better. A good example is one of our schools is just 50 meters apart from a government school. And when we came in, we introduced the feeding program. It was very regular. And a year later, the public school didn't get any child being enrolled in their nursery school that year. They actually had about 6 or 7 enrollment, and the head teacher was very concerned. She asked the teacher in charge of the pre-primary section what was happening, and the pre-primary teacher explained, since this school came here and started to offer porridge at break time, we are seeing more children going to that school than our school. And from the discussions, they were able to start also to implement a feeding program for their children. They were able also to start to engage. So the head teacher visited us and wanted to learn what we were doing and how they could be able to implement some of those things. And they learned we were visiting parents in their homes. We were more concerned about where the child was coming from, compared to them who just sat and by default, because they are government institutions and they have no one else competing with them, they just sat and waited for the children to come. If the children came, they had issues, they had challenges, it was no bother to them. Their work was to teach them. But now with our approach and with our model, they were starting to find that there was challenges. They were not having children to teach anymore. And this has helped them rethink how they are approaching their processes and how they teach children. And I think this coexistence between the public institutions and the private institutions and how they complement towards the goal of accessing quality education that can then assist people to be able to depend on themselves at the end of the process is very, very significant from where I sit.
I see. What I wonder is, are there enough jobs for the people who pass university?
There are no jobs. There are not enough jobs. And I think it's still a problem that is in its early stages. Unemployment is highest among the youth right now. And that's why it is a conversation that we need to have in terms of what is happening, that the that the people we are seeing exiting, the way Ogaga has said, from the learning institutions are not finding jobs. So they are still, that's also still another separate problem, that the economy is not creating enough jobs to accommodate these people. But are these people well equipped to be able to think around the immediate environment? Because what we see, there are a lot of resources, there are a lot of opportunities in the local communities, whether it is in farming. They say in Africa, every stone you turn, there is a problem. That means every stone you turn, there is an opportunity. But then we're also looking at the capital. We are looking at the resources that could be available to these people to be able to turn some of these problems into opportunities. And that is also still a big challenge. So many of us actually, even as we speak, even as I speak about my organization, it is doing what it's doing because 90% of it is funded from outside Kenya. It's supported by people who are not in the country. So the capital that is needed to drive certain some of these things that we are talking about is still not in country. It is coming outside. And depending on the relationships that are there and the things that happen, you find we go back to just charity the way we have said. I might really need to make a change, but I don't have the money to invest in it. And I can't find money locally to invest in it. So I go back to finding people outside the country to be able to assist me make the change that I need. So we still in that kind of contradiction and dilemma at this point.
Okay, I see.
Okay.
Sorry. Maybe.
Okay.
Francis, you can go.
Yes, Mr. Ogada has really spoken out very well in terms of really outlining the statistics. And when you look at how he actually have been able to outline this, you could tell he did mention that close to 10 million students, right, are in school. And then you have around 500 that transition to high school from 10 million. And then all of a sudden you have 100, because when you add the 85,000 and the 50,000 graduating, it gives it to brings it to around 135,000 students that graduate or leave institutions of higher learning. From previously 10, now when you compute the 500,000 that transition to high school, out of the 10 million that starts, that means it is just 10%. 10% of the 10 million transition to the high school. And then when you look at it very well, even when they transition to high school, the rate of dropping is still so sharp, because when you look at it, 500,000 that transition now to high school, and then from high school to the university and graduate. By the time they graduate, the whole country has only 135,000, bringing us to less than 5% of the total number of people that enroll, that start education, start receiving education. Now, you will agree with me, this number is too low than expected. And there are mechanisms that have been put left, right, and center. But I think the strategies and the resources and the facilities and everything in place can by default only support this number, which is less than 5%. The question here that we are discussing, the big topic that we are discussing is the quality of education that is being, that now needs to go out. And when you look at it, the question is, how do we increase this number? And that's something that most governments and even private sector is struggling with. How to increase this number from less than 4% to at least 20%. Now, leaving that aside, there also, in my own country, there are a number of challenges. There are a number of things that government has put in place that really has a big problem. Uganda in itself, 80% of the whole population, 80% of them are young people living between the age of 35 and 15 years, 15 years to 35 years. Mm-hmm. We are the majority. So that's 80% constitute 80% of the national population. Now, when you look at 80% of the national population, we have about 120 that graduate nationally every year from both private and government university. Now, when this 120% that graduate every year, you will find government saying, oh, when they do the statistics, even to the statistics supporting the number of available jobs in the job market, there is only space for 15,000. So you have 120 graduating and leaving the university, and then there is only a job slot for 15,000. What happens to the remaining 105?
Yeah.
Now, that partly is a big challenge contributed by a number of factors. In Uganda specifically, some of the reasons, some of the big struggle in trying to change and trying to address this issue has been laxity on government side to try and adjust the curriculum. We have a curriculum, in fact, we're using a curriculum that was designed by the British. That is, it was designed in 1948. And the way it is designed, it has only been revised once. The last time it was revised was in 1978. And now we're talking about 2022. So you can see that for all those years, revision of the curriculum has not taken place. Now, as that is taking place, you come to realize that government's priority ceases to become, education is not something that they now focus on. They start to look at the 105 that do not have employment to become now a burden on the economy.
Okay.
And then because of that, it creates analogy that the young people in this country now are not very creative. And yet, when you look at the back of the mind, the population growth has been taking place, the national statistics has been growing, and they have been watching what is happening. But then the challenges in the education system, even with the introduction of a number of programs, still leaves government burdened with a big number of people looking for jobs. So for Uganda's case, Kenya, I must say, Kenya has made very good strides in terms of education and accessibility. And now the discussion has shifted from accessibility to quality education. What kind of quality? Uganda, in this case, is still in this period of accessibility. The big discussion there is still accessibility, because there are places where you can go and you find one primary school, it is serving a population of around 50,000 people. And that is a public government school. And then with such an influx, you see that the discussion is still on accessibility. Now, with all these other things tied to it, you realize that the charity organizations play a very pivotal role in helping to be able to ease the government a little bit of the pressure, because then the more people involved into the other social, other social organizations, they get involved, the burden is released from government. And then when that burden is released from the government, usually and oftentimes, the number is still, the rate at which that is released is still not sufficient enough. So it relieves when you have a lot of unemployment rate, which is high. Right now we have 80% of the national population is the youth, but then when you look at the unemployment rate, it's beyond 60% of the 80% youth. So there is, when you look at that, there is still a big challenge that I really, I see that it's coming up. And then with Kenya having made a lot of strides, Uganda is still a little bit behind.
Yes, but if we look at the unemployed students that come out of the university, What could be the solution of that? Finding jobs for those academics who finally made it.
Now, one of the solutions. Okay. Sorry.
Should I come in?
Whoever wants to talk.
Okay.
What I think is that.
Okay.
Sorry.
Continue.
I'm saying that the ideal is to have education that is fully funded either by the government through taxes or by able parents. But in our situations in Africa, as you've heard from Uganda's case and Kenya's case, parents are not in a position to fully fund the education. So I think the best strategy for Kenya is full funding by the government through taxes. But then here comes another challenge. For example, in Kenya, we say that we have free primary education. But I can tell you that there are fees charged. For example, examination fees. I know that because I support about 10 children that require that support from my neighboring primary school. So, and if those children do not get someone with the capacity to support them, most of them spend the day on the road. The teacher sending them home, them going back to school. So they waste the entire day there. They don't get that quality of education that would enable them after completion, even when they don't get jobs. Because I know that even in developed countries, we have challenges of formal employment. People have to become creative, but then your level of creativity is dependent on the quality of education that you access. And the main challenge actually now to this access to quality education is these basic things. Food. Yes, you are paying tuition for someone in high school by calling it free day secondary school, but they don't have food at home, or they cannot afford that 10,000 that you are charging them to get the food at school. So when they waste their time on the road, they don't even get that little bit of education that is going on in the classroom. By the time they graduate, they won't have the skills and the capacity to think beyond the limitations of being employed by someone else. They won't think about, let's say, practicing agribusiness to generate income from it. So we need a system whereby, to start with, the government can fully fund all that, maybe provide even lunch in schools, and provide all those basics, like we were given books and pens in school, which has now ended. And by the way, the new competence-based curriculum, which is actually intended to equip the students or the pupils with the skills by the time they graduate, is good, but then it's also resource intensive. There are a lot of things that they are required to buy so that they can do those projects. And these students are sent home to parents who are poor to get those items. So that means wasting even more time and actually missing some of those projects because they cannot afford them. So if the government is really keen on ensuring real quality, free primary and secondary education, they should facilitate all these at the beginning so that by the time we have this cohort graduating, they will be competent enough to create jobs, even online and even here, basically, so that we will have now parents of the future that can support their children and support others. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Marianne, I still remember your question, and I think I also would want to address myself to it. How do we support the big lot of students who transition from higher learning institutions and somehow may not afford to get employment opportunities? As I had said earlier, we've had a lot of push towards literacy instead of building competencies. And that is why we speak about very good literacy ratios amongst the adult population in Kenya. For example, we stand at about 84, which gives us about a rating of number 106 globally in terms of literacy. But then literacy is the ability to read and write, so to say. Does that really transition into a competent individual who can action the various development projects. Now, you realize that we churn out slightly above 100,000 students every year graduating from our universities or graduating from our other higher learning institutions, including technical training colleges, vocational training institutions, and a number of polytechnics where they undertake a number of diploma or craft certificate courses. These people, about 15 to 20% transition into formal levels of employment. Less than 5% transition into self-employment. So, to answer your question a little candidly, how then do we improve those statistics to move way up there so that we can accommodate the bigger number of these people who transition either in formal employment or in self-employment? Number one, we must have an economy that enlarges itself to create job opportunities, reviving local industries, which is a government intervention, creating job opportunities through a number of policy framework, and seeing how to reorganize the government agenda so that at least we have a lot of constant focus on youth employment. Over and above that, how do we ensure that access to credit facilities is something that is lauded, is something that is easy for people to do? I know that our government, for instance, has put in place a number of programs to really support the youth access credit facilities with which they can start personal businesses. We have things like the Youth Development Fund that is coming in, the Women Enterprise Fund that is coming in, but also we must also have our banking institution, our financial institutions offering low interest rate credit facilities to the youth so that at least they can access that and somehow establish business opportunities on their own. We also have to see how we can access government business opportunities, especially for these youths who are transitioning from higher learning institutions. For example, in Kenya, we have the AGPO program, where if you're a youth and you register, then probably your farm is likely to win a number of government tenders. But how can we improve those opportunities? And how can we make the youth aware? Because sometimes I think the situation, the difficulty sometimes is not in lack of opportunities there are, but the knowledge, whether these youths who are graduating or are being channeled out, do they know some of these programs exist and they can access them? Do they know that there's youth fund? Do they know that we have loans? Do they know that we have some of these government opportunities through which they can do business? And I think our focus must be also making these youths, as they graduate, are they aware that some of those opportunities exist? Over and above that, we must embrace an entrepreneurial culture among our learners so that entrepreneurship becomes a core subject, a taught course within these structures of learning. Whether you're doing medicine, whether you're doing law, whatever profession you're doing, are we going to have a situation where we are teaching and embracing entrepreneurship amongst learners so that even as they complete their studies, they know that there's every opportunity for them to even just seek self-gainful employment, be creative, be innovative, and do something on their own. And I think those are some of the opportunities that we can really expand within our nation and even just within our continent to see how we can improve the issues of self-employment. But over and above that, the employment rates are still very low, not just in Kenya. It's a problem in Africa, and it's a problem even globally elsewhere, that all governments are really trying to, are fighting towards creating better business opportunities, job opportunities for everyone, but they can't still match it because we have so many who are leaving learning institutions ready for the job market, but with a very thin economy. And especially now with the shocks that really affect the economy, the issues of the COVID-19 pandemic and things like that, they begin to shrink our economy globally, regionally, and even just as a nation. And as that economy shrinks, and actually, by the way, Marianne, I must mention that quite a number of people lost their jobs since COVID struck. And they didn't just lose them in Kenya, they lost them in Africa, they lost them in Europe. And still, it's causing a lot of stress in the economy. I think the world has just begun to heal, albeit slightly, following the shocks of the COVID-19. But we must still realize that these challenges are there with us. But until we, the youths who are getting off higher levels of education, undertake very active steps towards creating jobs, also just for our own and for people around us, then it's so difficult. Government alone cannot provide all the jobs for everybody in this country.
Can I add quickly on that? We must also appreciate that a lot of African countries and Kenya not being left behind. Like Ochieng alluded to it, we are still using a very colonial education system. And that is partly one of the biggest challenge, because a lot of our curriculums and the way we teach, the objectives of the colonialists were very different, were to create a labor market, to train people for employment, to work in the farms, to work in the fields, to work in whatever industries they were running at that time. And that mentality has not shifted. So while we are training Africans to do African things and solutions, the mentality of the policymakers are still stuck in the very colonial era. And that's also part of the challenge, where this curriculum and education model is coming from. Have we managed to transition it fully to be African, to be driven by African? And simple things like the language of examination is an issue. You know, for example, when everything has to be examined in English, and we see a problem there, because even when after I have learned English since my pre-primary school up to university level, still if I want to access some opportunities from British, I have to do an English examination test, you know, just to prove that I know English and I can be able to speak and comprehend things in English, which I think such mentalities around language, around who we are as a people, the confidence that it brings, that we are sort of trying to chase a standard of the British and other people, makes us feel inferior, makes us feel not appreciate who we are and the solutions that we can be able to drive. Because then from that point, even if you know how to do something, you still think you are not good enough because you can't express yourself in English, or you can't do certain things the way the standard has been set. So I think we need also to have a mentality shift in terms of how we measure success, how we consider success, and how we consider what do we see as someone having abilities, certain abilities to do certain things. I think coming from that colonial perspective is also pressing a lot of challenge on us. We might be actually seeing that we are doing very well in comparison to a colonial standard. Or in some ways, we can be seeing we are not doing very, very well in comparison to the same colonial standard. But in reality, we are doing very well in certain areas. So I think as we deal with the mentality issues around that and the originality of what we call our education system, we need to appreciate that we have those constraints, and we need to make something and start to shift our mentality to focus on things that are truly ours, that will solve the problems in our way. Another second point I want to make is organizations that support, because African economies, a lot of them in Kenya and elsewhere, they depend on two things. Government is the biggest investor, and then we have international development agencies that do a lot of work here, a lot of international aid organizations that do a lot of investment in these economies. In Kenya, for example, we have big agencies, international agencies that work here. But what we see is expatriation of funds and capital back to their own countries. So multinationals build their industries here, they make huge profits, they ship it back. But even for charity organizations that work here, you will find that the locals work at a lower level and they earn small pay. But the majority of the big level jobs that pay better are their expatriates from their countries. They are paid differently than the locals, and a lot of this capital go back to their countries. To be able to provide solutions for many Africans, we will require a system, and I've often said, you need to fund locals to do things. You need to believe in organizations like Village to Global Foundation, you know, help them build competencies that will see these organizations become organizations of generation after generation. Because what we see is a problem where we start a small organization like this, it's compared to an international organization, and we fail in most of the tests because we don't have the resources, we don't have the competencies. So if we have partners who are coming in, if we have international agencies that are coming in and they're deliberately investing in the locals, in the locals organizations, in the locals infrastructure, helping people run businesses with the standards that are acceptable internationally. You know, deliberately seeing what are the opportunities there are in terms of resources. If you are working with a group of women, can you empower them to build a company? Can you invest in that company? Can you train them? Can you continue to empower them and give them the opportunity to be featured on international televisions like BBC and the rest, so that they rise and grow and build an infrastructure around them that can be able to employ many others, rather than when you come in and you see the opportunity and you see a group, a small group like ours, what you see is you want to be on top of that infrastructure. So when we are raising funds, you receive the bulk of the pay and go back with it in your country. You don't really help. So we feel there is a lot of capital that comes from the international community, but a lot of it is shipped back in those countries. The interventions they do here, the actual footprint on the ground still remains very, very minimal. So we will want to fix, or we will want to suggest that around those, especially development partners, if they focused on empowering the locals, empowering local institutions, and building faith in them over time, we could see that also playing a role in reducing the level of unemployment that we have.
Definitely. So what I see is that you're suffering from the same things we are suffering in Europe, actually. We don't have jobs for the postgraduates. The people who leave university lack the abilities to build their own companies because they're not trained in the basic business techniques. And there should be a postgraduate thing that empowers you to found a business. And we are still in an educational system that produces employees instead of entrepreneurs. And this is a lot of difficulty because we lose the creativity. The way the educational system is built, it produces people who copy, not inventors. Wycliffe, what would you think of that?
It's true. It's definitely true, Marianne. Similar kind of programs, and we in the universities, and I think this is some of the things we are trying to also just change that paradigm shift. And I think I will speak for my university, for instance, Rongo University in Kenya, which is one of the public universities in the country. We are trying now to ensure that we ingrain entrepreneurial teaching, that there's a unit on entrepreneurship for learners across the schools, so that we try to build, the competencies among learners, that there's something they can found business opportunities for themselves. Because if we don't get this, Marianne, it becomes very difficult. You will go outside there and just register a business organization, whether it's just a sole proprietorship, a partnership, or just a company. You will need the services of a consultant. When these are things that you can do at the comfort of your house on your own, but then unless you know that these things are possible, you're going to look for money to pay consultants, and that's already putting you off. And opportunities just go like that. And today, for you even just to do some business opportunities, even with the government, they require you to have some form of registration, whether it's a business or a company name, and something like that. You must have some form of license. So it just starts from as simple as building your business cycle, whether just getting a name with which you want to trade and things like that. But if our learners do not know that those opportunities exist, it is very difficult really for them, to pursue those opportunities. And I think we must change our learning systems to begin producing not just job seekers, but job creators, and even just those people who can just get out there and get opportunities for themselves. I agree with you totally. It's a problem. I'm surprised it's in Europe. We thought we fight those problems here in Kenya or in Africa alone.
No, we're facing the same. If you think of Spain, they have 50% of the population is academics, and most of them without job. They totally lost the ground.
Serious. We actually thought there is very little that side, but it looks like it's a bigger problem that side as well. There's something. I agree with what Wycliffe has said and Zach in terms of changing the system. Changing the system is very key. It's not just about changing the system. It's about changing the system and enabling the system to thrive, creating an enabling environment. Even with the entrepreneurs, even with businesses, even when you look at the economic aspect, I think our governments, in most cases, the government is in a state of feeling that they are the ones that are supposed to be doing everything for the civilians or for its people. But in countries where I've seen the private sector being given support, where systems have been created and it supports the growth of the private sector, I have seen that it boosts innovation and then the entrepreneurial skills. And when you look at it, in Uganda's case, what would be the solution would be changing the system, creating an enabling environment to allow the system to grow and thrive, and that will give us definitely different results, and we will definitely find that the economy starts to thrive, and then we move into the right direction. And it's something that I believe can work for Uganda and can also work for many other African countries.
Yes, what's beginning here is mentorship. That people who did study and had their jobs and went into business are mentoring those who come out of university and are not skilled in business skills. So this is one of the solutions that can be made. And when you think of the Russians, they are inventing new school systems where they teach children differently, where they begin that children teach children, and they are creating specialists that begin to study at age of 15, 16, because they're focused on certain subjects. So I think we need to go more experimental on those things and leave the old, as you say, colonial traits. They are out of time.
Okay.
Yes, I just wanted to make one more point. We have a mentality of shifting things in Africa. Sometimes when the problem is too big, we try to find a way to go around it. When we are talking about mentality shift, we need to change that. And one big example I usually use is when the colonialists left us, they left us with a working railway. The railway was very good. It was actually sustaining the economy. But because it was too huge and they didn't train us on how to manage it, the easiest thing we could do was to dismantle it and try to simplify it so that we can be able to manage it. And in us pursuing the simplification, it failed. And we ended up without a railway, and we introduced a quick solution, which was a public service vehicle that then causes a lot of chaos because we are not also prepared to go hard and take time to create solutions that work. And I think I want to invite especially young people who are leaving university to be able to start to engage in system thinking, to be able to come up with bold solutions and not seek the easy way out. We have a public service sometimes that seeks the easy solution out. So we boldly go out and train so many teachers, and prepare so many teachers. Now that we have realized we have so many teachers and we have fewer employment, instead of us finding ways to fix that, we introduce another qualification on top of that. So now you are no longer a teacher unless you get this new training, So sort of trying to sieve them and try to cut them, and now say, if you had a P1 teacher, you are no longer a teacher unless you have a diploma, So this kind, for me, in terms of policy approach, I see it as a problem we have and a mentality that we need to deal with. Just because something is huge and complex and we don't understand it, seeking to undo it or to have quick fixes, sometimes it doesn't work best. So because we are a society and we are a community, we need to work on complex solutions that fix the problems that we are facing. And this is also something that we deliberately need to learn as people come out of university, come out of higher education, higher institutions of learning. They need to deliberately be introduced to system thinking. And I know Ogaga has championed for entrepreneurship. I took entrepreneurship course myself I've taken it on many different platforms. But I also think system thinking is missing, and people need to be engaged in system thinking. Government is not one component. It's not one system. A railway system brings together different components. And unless you understand it in totality, you will not be the best out there. So we come out and we have one mentality, and when we are employed in an organization, we only see things in one spectrum. We have not learned to engage system thinking, to see different things feed into each other, and to be able to get the results we need. So I will propose, and I will continue to advocate for this, that young people should learn to engage in system thinking. They need to see things not just as one that exists in unilateral, but multiple things coming together to solve a problem. So how do we build different organizations that solve different dimensional projects or problems that we face? That's also a point that we really need to work on.
Thank you. And I also feel like I need to add something to what Zach has said, that as we look into the future, we need to build systems that are futuristic in nature. And in this, for example, let's look at access, because then give an example. Kenya, for instance, has stopped the conversation of access to quality education. They are now on, they stopped the conversation of access to education. They are now on quality education. That conversation definitely changes. And with the time, you see that it will now need to have where we have to look at when we made 100 schools, for example, and these are the problems in 100 schools. We need to look at the number of schools also will definitely become a problem if there are so many and they're not fully fledged. I think I would rather go, for me, I would go with the situation where we have 50 schools, teachers are all available, the numbers, the pupils are getting the right education, and then fully fledged facilities. And this will reduce the problems that will come ahead, even as we look at expansion. So I think we need to develop things and systems looking at possibilities of having a more fully fledged facilities rather than having the more numbers of school, but with later on with a bigger problem that will blow up, and then we cannot be able to, our system cannot be able to handle it. And my last words, I know time is fast spent. I know that the responsibility to build Africa in itself relies solely on this generation and transitioning to the next generation and making it a better place. My ancestors, for example, did not have opportunity to go to school. I had an opportunity to go to school. And I know that with the next generation, they will have a different discussion. They will be discussing something different. And that shows a level of progress, but though over time. But we cannot deny the fact that there are challenges that are really coming with each generation. Let us continue to look for more skills-based and build systems that are more skills-based. And for God and my country.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe if you allow me, please, to just also make my final remarks so that at least I can have opportunity to chase another engagement I'm having at 2 p.m. On my part, as I finish up, I want to really send a very, very warm word of congratulations and gratitude to every aid organization out there that is supporting young people to access quality education. The problems that we had, for which aid is important, even before free primary education, are still with us today. We have young ones there who cannot even afford, leave alone 3 meals a day, even just 1 meal in a day. We have young ones there who cannot even afford uniforms for school, no shoes, no nothing. They can't just go out, go to school. As much as education, as we say, is free today in Kenya. So those organizations that support these children out there, you win my appreciation, you win my thanks and utmost respect, and I thank you. And I think I want to also to just loud it off for our German partners that I personally work with, the Patoyepa board, for the wonderful work they're doing in Kenya, expanding education opportunities for people across our major cities, right from Mombasa, from Nairobi, Homa Bay County, Siaya, and everywhere else, whether for primary, secondary, or university education. These are people who deserve our respect every other day. There are people like these who made us who we are today. And I will never finish up this show without giving my utmost respect and appreciation for all of them. And Mary Ann, to you and everything else that you do and any partner that you have with you who are helping you assist African children across to access quality education. I thank you and I continue praying for you. So my Patoyepa people and our Kenyan partners in Mombasa, Cleo, in Nairobi, Boniface, and everywhere else, I thank you very much, and let's continue doing the good job that we do. Asanteni sana.
Thank you. Well, I wanted to say something to Zachuas. We really need to change the thinking, to go for complex circles, to be sustainable, and to think in feedback loops. There was somebody in Austria who thought of not anymore selling a washing machine, but only selling 1,000 washings, so that he can produce a very good washing machine, lend it to people, and then take it back and care for the recycling.
Yes.
So, but this is a very different way of thinking. Do I buy a washing machine or do I buy 1,000 or 5,000 washings? I don't need to have the property myself. And if we begin to think this way, maybe we can change a bit and take more care about the environment and the people.
Yes. I think I go with my closing remarks. And I think I want to first thank all of you, the panelists, and the conversation we have had today. It's always very enriching to talk about education and poverty and where we are. I've learned so much from today's panel, reminded myself of so many things that matter. I think for us to take Africa to the next level and to take Kenya to the next level, we should never look down upon the small ideas and the simple ideas that we are making on a daily basis. I always say the Mercedes-Benz we see today, the S-Class 350, the best, is work that started in 1904. And it has been improved over and over and over and over up to what we see today. So even if we see our own tuk-tuk that doesn't have a fan and it is uncomfortable, we need to be able to improve on it over and over and over again. So our ideas, we must cherish them, we must invest in them, we must continue to work on them and bring them to a level that we desire. But if we just easily run to simple solutions, get the comfort that comes with the Mercedes-Benz, we will never make it. Sure. This is the challenge we have today. As a third world country, as a third world continent, we must develop our own solutions rather than run for simple comfort that has been worked on over the years and been invested in millions of dollars of shillings over a period of time. That one we must accept. And thank you to Furaha EV for the support they give us. Thank you to everybody that is working to support Inua Village to Global Foundation. We are continuing to do what we are doing because we are standing on your shoulders, and we really appreciate that.
Thank you. Denis, your final remarks? Denis, would you like to give us your final remarks?
Maybe what I need to say to close is that what I'm saying is that everyone that is sponsoring education, from government to other charity organizations, we should focus on building the whole person, provide food for them, provide means that they can get accommodation, provide the school fees, so that this person can leverage the opportunities in school to grow and be able to provide solutions in problems, because I believe that's where jobs are. Jobs are in creating solutions. And this person can only get out of poverty if they know how best to solve other people's problems. So we need to sustain them in schools, especially now that we have competence-based curriculums. And that requires providing them with the resources they need for those projects. And it's not just by sending them to school by paying their tuition fees, but also facilitating them by providing all those resources they need to learn like every other child from the well-up families. So I believe that's the way to fight poverty through education. And that's how charitable organizations can support. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. I know that we all need to go, and I hope see you soon another time.
Thank you very much. Kwaheri.
Thank you.
Bye.